I destroyed everything. I crossed a line I can never uncross. With the one person I was meant to protect, I poisoned the only real bond I had left. How could I be so weak? So selfish? Every time I see him, I drown in the shame. The disgust clawing at my chest. I was supposed to be better. I was supposed to love him like a mother. Instead, I ruined us both. Forever. I never thought I would end up here, whispering a truth I can barely admit to myself. When I booked that little weekend getaway, I thought it was just a break we both needed. A reset. A chance to reconnect. To remember that we were family. Even if life had broken and rearranged us in ways neither of us had chosen. Rachel, the careful stepmother. Logan, the boy who had quietly become a man right before my eyes. Somehow, the years had slipped away. Somehow, the distance between us had grown quieter, heavier, and somehow, I stopped seeing him as just my stepson. I didn't notice it at first. Not when he loaded my luggage into the car. Not when he laughed too loudly at my terrible jokes. Not even when his hand lingered a second longer than necessary on my back as we checked into the cabin. It was the dress. The way he held it up. The way he looked at me, like I was someone he saw, really saw, after so long of feeling invisible, abandoned, less than. That one glance cracked something deep inside me. And when midnight came, and the air was thick with a kind of silence too heavy to name. It happened, a moment so small, so shattering, that it rewrote the very foundation of what I thought was unchangeable. I should have stopped it. I should have turned away. Built walls higher, thicker, but the truth is, part of me didn't want to. Part of me had been starving for so long. For a touch, a look, a sense that I still mattered. This is not a proud story. This is not a story of right and wrong. It's a story of loneliness, of broken hearts reaching for warmth in the darkest hours. And it changed everything. Our house always felt colder once the sun went down. Even when the thermostat claimed it was warm, the air seemed to settle heavy in the corners. After my husband's death, silence had wrapped itself around the walls, pressing in with a weight that felt impossible to shake. Logan and I existed like two satellites orbiting the same hollow planet. Dinner was quick. Conversations, polite but shallow. I told myself we were healing, each in our own way. But deep down, I knew better. The living room still held my husband's scent on the old leather chair. The hallway still creaked where he used to tread. Everywhere I turned, memories pushed against me like a tide I couldn't fight. Logan spent most of his time behind a closed bedroom door, and I spent mine pretending it didn't bother me. Loneliness had seeped into every part of the house. Every part of me. I had become a ghost, moving through routines, clinging to whatever scraps of normalcy I could find. I didn't realize how desperate I had become, not until that weekend changed everything. Sometimes, late at night, I'd catch glimpses of Logan out of the corner of my eye, a fleeting shadow moving through the hallway. A murmured good night that lingered longer than necessary. There was a careful distance we both maintained, an unspoken rule neither of us dared to break. But the connection was there. Small moments. The way he'd glance back over his shoulder when leaving for work. The rare times he'd bring me coffee without being asked. The silent way he'd fix something around the house, just because he noticed it needed doing. We never talked about it. We barely talked about anything real. It was safer that way. Safer to pretend that the slight brushes of hands at the dinner table were accidental. That the quick looks, the tiny hesitations, didn't mean anything. I blamed the loneliness, the grief, the way a house full of empty spaces can trick your heart into hearing echoes where there are none. I told myself it was natural to crave connection, that needing someone didn't have to mean needing him. Still, there were nights I lay awake, feeling the weight of the air between our rooms, wondering if he felt it too. And deep down, part of me knew he did. It was my idea, of course. A weekend away, just the two of us. No schedules, no reminders of everything we had lost. Just a small cabin by the lake, tucked far enough from the world that maybe, just maybe, we could breathe again. When I suggested it, Logan didn't say much. He simply nodded, his green eyes unreadable, and offered to drive. Part of me was relieved he agreed so easily. Another part of me, the part that still dreamed foolish little dreams, hoped it would mean something more. A way to stitch together the frayed edges of what we were. The drive was long and quiet. I fiddled with the radio, tapping my fingers against the window, pretending not to notice how often his gaze flickered toward me when he thought I wasn't looking. The sun dipped low as we pulled up to the cabin, the air rich with the scent of pine and the promise of rain. Inside, everything was simple. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, a fireplace that hadn't seen a real fire in years. It was perfect in that messy, worn kind of way that made you forget about time. That night, we unpacked slowly, laughter echoing off the old wood walls. For the first time in what felt like forever, I saw him smile, a real smile, and for a fleeting second, it felt almost easy to believe that healing was possible. I should have known better. The second day slipped by in a haze of soft conversations and stolen glances. We explored the woods, skipped stones across the lake, shared lazy meals cooked over a sputtering campfire. It all felt so normal, so dangerously easy. That evening, I stood by the cracked mirror in the small bedroom, holding up 2 dresses, one casual, light and breezy, the other, a slinky, shimmering slip I had thrown into the suitcase without thinking, a leftover relic from a different life. I turned toward the doorway, uncertain. "Logan?" I called, my voice catching more than I intended. "I need an opinion." He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, his gaze sharp and unreadable. I held up the casual dress first. He shrugged. Safe, predictable. Then I lifted the slip. His entire body shifted. For a moment, he said nothing, just stared. The air between us thickened, buzzing, like the split second before a summer storm cracks the sky open. "That one," he said finally, his voice low, almost rough. "Definitely that one." I should have laughed it off. Should have chosen the safe dress and buried the moment under layers of polite awkwardness. But I didn't. I slid the slip dress over my skin, feeling it cool and shiver against me. When I turned back to him, something in his expression faltered. We both knew we were standing too close. We both knew neither of us should move. And yet, when he stepped forward, when his fingers brushed the strap on my shoulder, neither of us stopped it. It wasn't a kiss, not yet. It was worse. A breath, a look, a silent agreement written in the space where words had no power. And just like that, the line we had never dared to cross vanished. The moment his fingers grazed my skin, the world shrank into nothing but the space between us. The worn wooden floor, the flicker of the old lamp, the soft hum of rain beginning against the roof. 2014. It all faded. There was only his touch, tentative yet electric, sending a shiver down my spine. I should have stepped back. I should have said his name in that warning tone, the one I'd mastered over the years. But instead, I just stood there, frozen, drinking in the weight of his gaze. Logan looked at me like I was something fragile and forbidden, something he shouldn't want but couldn't stop reaching for. His hand slid from my shoulder to the curve of my arm, leaving a trail of goosebumps in its wake. My breath caught, trembling between my ribs, too loud in the heavy silence. His other hand hovered near my waist, hesitating. 2014, asking without words. I nodded. The slip dress clung to me like a second skin, the fabric whispering against my body with every shallow breath. Logan's fingers brushed the hem, and I felt it. 2014, that desperate ache, deep and aching, the kind that came not from lust, but from years of loneliness curling inward on itself. When he finally touched me, it wasn't greedy, it wasn't rushed, it was reverent, almost aching in its gentleness, as if he was afraid I'd vanish if he moved too fast. My own hands betrayed me. They found the planes of his chest, the steady thunder of his heartbeat beneath my palms. He was trembling, just as I was, and somehow that made it worse. 2014, more real. Our foreheads touched, a ragged breath shared between us. No words, just heat, and fear, and a hunger too old and too deep to deny any longer. The storm outside cracked the sky open. Inside, We surrendered to the one already tearing us apart. The morning light was cruel. It flooded the tiny room with a cold, indifferent brightness that made everything too real, too sharp. I lay still beneath the thin blanket, eyes wide open, heart pounding against the quiet like a guilty drumbeat. Beside me, Logan slept, or pretended to. His back was turned, his breathing too steady to be anything but forced. I watched the slow rise and fall of his shoulders, 1,000 words burning on the tip of my tongue but none brave enough to cross the silence between us. What had we done? The question looped in my mind, relentless and unforgiving. No matter how many times I blinked against the sunlight, the answer didn't change. No matter how hard I wished to rewind the night, to press some invisible undo button, it was carved into us now, a permanent fracture. I slipped out of bed, the floor cold beneath my bare feet. Every movement felt heavy, deliberate, like dragging chains I had chosen to shackle myself with. My dress lay crumpled in the corner, a silent witness to my failure. I dressed quickly, my hands trembling so badly I could barely button my sweater. When I glanced back, Logan was sitting up, the sheet bunched around his waist. His face pale, his eyes haunted. He opened his mouth to speak, but I shook my head sharply. Don't. I couldn't hear it. Whatever apology or justification he might offer, it wouldn't erase the truth thundering between us. We had crossed a line we could never uncross. The cabin, once cozy, now felt suffocating. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of the wind against the windows, seemed to accuse us. I wanted to run. I wanted to stay. I wanted to tear my own heart out for betraying everything I thought I stood for. Instead, I just stood there, staring at him, while the morning swallowed us whole. I moved through the rest of the morning like a ghost, half aware of my own body, as if it belonged to someone else. The kitchen smelled faintly of coffee, but even that simple comfort turned my stomach. I couldn't look at Logan, couldn't bear the way his presence filled the room, thick with words unsaid. Guilt gnawed at me, raw and merciless, every time I caught a glimpse of him out of the corner of my eye. The memory of his touch seared through me like a brand. I had crossed the one line I had sworn to protect, the one that defined who I was, 2014, or who I thought I was. What kind of woman does this? The question rang through my mind. Relentless, vicious. I wasn't drunk. I wasn't confused. I knew exactly what had happened. Worse, a part of me, 2014, a terrible, aching part, 2014, had wanted it, had needed it. I hated myself for that. And yet, under the shame, something even more terrifying stirred, longing. A longing not just for his touch, but for the way he looked at me, 2014, as if I were not broken. As if I were still worth wanting. I pressed my hands against the kitchen counter, trying to steady the shaking. I could fix this, I told myself. We could bury it, pretend it never happened. That was what adults did, wasn't it? Made mistakes and then built walls around them, high and wide, and called it healing. But part of me knew better. This wasn't a mistake I could tuck neatly away. It lived now, breathing between us, shifting the ground beneath our feet. I stole a glance at Logan. He was standing by the window, hands shoved deep into his pockets. His jaw clenched so tight I thought he might shatter. He wouldn't look at me either. Good. Maybe if we both pretended hard enough, we could survive this. But deep down, I knew the truth. Surviving isn't the same as living. And whatever was broken inside me, it didn't want survival anymore. It wanted something recklessly, desperately alive. We didn't speak about it. Not that day, not the next. We packed our bags in silence, our hands brushing once, twice, both of us pulling away as if burned. On the drive home, the radio filled the space we couldn't. Shallow songs buzzing through the speakers, meaningless and safe. Every mile that pulled us closer to home seemed to wedge the distance between us deeper into the cracks already forming. When we returned to the house, it didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a museum of things we couldn't say. His shoes by the door, my coat on the hook, All the tiny rituals of a shared life now suffocating in their ordinariness. Logan avoided me. He stayed late at work. Disappeared into his room the moment he came home. I let him. I told myself it was better that way. Safer. But the absence of him was somehow louder than his presence had ever been. I found myself lingering in the hallway outside his door sometimes. Coffee mug cooling in my hand. Heartbeat hammering against my ribs. I told myself I just needed to ask him if he was okay. Just needed to say something, you 2014 anything, you 2014 to stitch back together what we had ripped apart. But I never knocked. At night, lying awake in the too large bed, I traced the memory of his touch against my skin like a ghost story. I hated myself for wanting it back. I hated the part of me that replayed every look, every breath, like a song I couldn't forget. We went back to being strangers. Strangers who knew too much. The weight of what we had done hung between us. Invisible but crushing. Every dinner eaten in silence. Every casual, good night, strangled by the words we didn't say. I missed him. God, I missed him. But there are some lines that once crossed. You can't simply redraw. You can only live with the wreckage. Step carefully around it. Try not to bleed on the way out. And so we lived, if you could even call it that. Some nights, when the house is still and the weight of the past presses heavier against my chest, I wonder if things could have been different. If I had said no. If I had turned away. If I had remembered sooner who I was supposed to be, instead of clinging to who I needed to feel like for one stolen night. But the truth is, there's no going back. Once you touch something forbidden, once you step over a line you swore you would never even approach, it lives inside you. It marks you, a silent scar only you can feel. I carry it with me now, the memory, the regret, and somewhere deeper, the terrible, aching tenderness of it all. It wasn't just a mistake. It was a choice, a need answered in the worst possible way. We live with it, separate but tethered by a moment that neither time nor silence can erase. I don't know if he hates me. I don't know if he forgives me. Some days, I'm not even sure if I forgive myself. But I know this. Loneliness can make monsters of us all. Or maybe it just peels back the masks we work so hard to wear. So I'll ask you, the one hearing my story now. If the only person who made you feel alive again was the one you should never have reached for, what would you have done?